Wednesday and happy almost the end of March. We're going to roll around the calendar for April 1st
And
in
hump
just a
day.
couple of days. No better time for there's no better time for me to introduce our guest tonight. What a fabulous human being. She's here with us from Topia.io and she is joining us from Berkeley, California, right up the street from where I am. Richard
Mm.
is back in Oklahoma tonight. And we are just happy to have you with us, Brooke. We've been waiting some time to have you come join us. And we have so much that we want to talk about tonight, and we're excited to get to know you a little bit, excited to learn about what brought you into computing and what are you doing up in Berkeley
Yeah,
and how's life treating you these days. Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
absolutely. Well, first, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to chat with you guys a little bit about Topia and how I came to work there and what we're all about. But to start us off, a little bit about me. I my background is in experience design, specifically with live events. So I have managed many communities here in the Bay Area. And produced events sometimes at a monthly occurrence for the community of people that I'm a part of here. Um, and that kind of led me down this much longer path into community building digitally once the pandemic hit. And so community has always been a really big part of my life. And it's kind of, in my blood, if I say so. So yeah, that's how I came here and moved to San Francisco at first, and eventually made my way over to the East Bay, but grew up in San Jose, so a Bay Area local.
Ah, so you're a Californian at heart and
I
by nature. Yes.
I am
Whoa.
definitely home.
And you knew what you were getting into. San Francisco is such a great city. I love it so much. Richard, have you been to San
Oh, I
Francisco?
spent way too many times. I spent way too long in San Francisco. The joy of cruise ships was it was a regular cruise ship turnaround. So I have spent more than my fair share of time walking up and down the pier in front of San Francisco.
Yes.
Place.
And there's so much happening here in terms of tech development and
Mhm.
opportunity. I know where I am in Monterey County, just south of you, Brooke, it really still feels very much like metaverse, NFT, digital space, cyberspace is almost in the air. We breathe it, we feel it, we see it, we think it.
Yeah.
There's nothing but possibility ahead. It's a very optimistic place to be in this space right at the moment. Do you find the same thing? Do you feel
Oh,
like you're re-energized and that there's a
absolutely.
wave coming of metaverse sites that are going to join us?
Yeah, I mean, the Bay Area has such a deeply rooted community surrounding the blockchain in general, whether that's NFTs or metaverse worlds or cryptocurrencies or whatever. All of the different ways that you can kind of use blockchain technology. The Bay Area is really a hub for that. So 75% of my community is people who are either working in this space or have been in the space and trading and doing all of that work for quite some time. So it's really wonderful because all of my friends that I have here, my neighbors, my community, my roommates, they're all people who are in this space. And so I can talk really openly about the things that excite me and bounce ideas off of them. And it's really energizing and invigorating and inspiring.
Richard knows he lived in New York City for quite some time, and so he knows, and he was in the real estate um, arena. And so he
Mhm.
knows what that feels like to be able to talk to other people that are also doing the same type of work, have the same ideas, have the same questions.
Yeah.
So Topia.io is an up and coming platform. I'm a little bit at a loss of how to describe it, but the
Yeah.
best way that I can say, and maybe you can fill in the blanks, is that it's a virtual world that you can kind of hang out in. You can establish a working desk office from,
Mhm.
and you can, at the same time, while you're moving forward with your own goals, collaborate and coordinate with the other people that are in Topia.io. Is that a good characterization?
Yeah. I think you're speaking a lot to some of the functionality that we have on the platform, like the things that you can do. The thing that we like to say is that Topia is a place to create social experiences that are real time. So you can create any kind of social experience, whether that's an office, as you were saying. It could also be a conference, a lunch and learn, a workshop. Even schools are using our platform for virtual education. It's really, a place of possibility. However far your imagination can go, you can create that and create those kinds of containers on Topia.
So, Richard, are we ready? What do we want to do?
Oh, I'm always ready. I'm sitting here waiting. I know I'm
What do
surrounded
we want to
by
do on Topia?
I'm surrounded by ladies, so I'm just going to wait to make sure that I listen before I comment. So I'm listening first. The first thing I want to ask, though, or bring up, is ask you what you think about individualism in Topia, because and I'll say whether I frame the question from, because
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite things about Topia is that you've picked completely androgynous
Yep.
images
Yeah.
for people. There's
Right.
there's a complete democracy in what the people who are in Topia look like,
Mm-hmm.
interact as, and that for me it made me think of, and I know this is a weird sign of it, made me think of school.
Yeah.
And I grew up and we went to school in South Africa where we all wore school uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, a school uniform was liberating, because over here, I look at these kids going to school and I wonder, what is the feeling between the difference between the kids rocking up at the school wearing Gucci's and the kids rocking up the school wearing Walmart?
Right.
And how does that affect the mentality of kids instantly? And as I said, I grew up in a school uniform and I loved it because everyone's the same. And I think in your world, everyone coming in with pretty much identical icons.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thinking? What was your choosing
Yeah.
behind that?
I mean, I think our artist, or the person who made that, could speak a little bit better to that than I will, but I will do the best I can.
Hmm.
The topi is what we call it. The little
Hmm.
topi. For those of you who haven't seen, he kind of looks like a human, or it kind of looks like a human, but it's kind of like also kind of marshmallowy. It's really cute
Hmm.
looking. And it's very androgynous. It's genderless. The only way that you can customize it is by choosing which color topi you decide to enter the world with.
Hmm.
And the reason why we've done that is for a multitude of reasons. I think sometimes in social spaces, specifically digitally, conversations have become so much more about personal brand than about meaningful, authentic connection.
Hmm.
Um, and so often we're kind of put in these situations where we are engaging online in this way that feels inauthentic because we're trying to be really clear about our identity, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there's a place for that, but what we found is that there's a really big gap for that kind of authentic connection. That way you can show up and just be in the fullness of who you are and not have to worry about what your avatar looks like, what clothing you're wearing, all of these layers and things that get in the way of just like getting to know people and actually like having those real heartfelt connections. So that was one of the reasons why we decided to do that. The other piece is that when we're talking about creative outlets for expression,
Hmm.
Topia is really focused on creative outlets of expression that are gifts to others.
Hmm.
So I, as a world builder, can create a world and design it from scratch with all of the artwork that I've designed myself if I'm an illustrator, and I can actually
Hmm.
gift that experience to others. And so we're trying to focus all of the creative energy on the experience piece of,
Hmm.
of our platform rather than the like identity piece. And like,
Hmm.
how can I validate my own identity and make sure that I am seen as whatever I desire to be seen as, instead of just showing up and being as we are.
Now, there is unfortunately a dark side to the same question,
Mm-hmm.
because anonymity brings forward trolls.
Right. So you
So
can't
that's
actually be
a.
anonymous on Topia. When you there's a variety of different ways that you can moderate spaces,
Hmm.
but if you have an open world and you're not asking users to sign in or authenticate, anyone can jump into your world at any time, and you won't be able to like know who they are or have an email associated or anything like that. But you, as a world builder, as a world owner, can actually mark your world to be authenticated, meaning anyone who enters your world would have to log in and have an email associated with their Topi character. We also have spatial audio and video chat in the platform. So we encourage, you can select for people to not be able to turn their camera off, as an example. So there are different ways that you can moderate spaces that decrease the amount of anonymity present in those worlds. But yes, you're totally right. I think that there is potential for trolls and things like that. We try really hard to give features that allow world builders and event producers to be able to have control over those kinds of particular challenges of community building.
So then that leaves the next question that comes onto that then is, if there are rules and kind of regulations that you're moderating for, what is your feeling towards censorship and having people removed from spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we are a platform that provides a container for others to create on. So we work really hard to let other community builders, if you guys wanted to bring your community of the Metaverse Watchdogs into Topia, you would be in full control of whatever rules and regulations you put in place there and be able to moderate the space yourself. We do have a terms of service that you can report, and it'll come back to the world owner and those kinds of things. And we obviously do our best to support. And if there's platform-wide issues, if there's users who are not engaging in ways that are aligned with our terms of service, we will take action. But having the ability to say and be who you are authentically in these spaces is really important to us. And we believe that what you do with your world is what you do with your world, and as long as it's not violating our terms of service, we're cool with that.
Well, it is also it's a way of formatting trust with your community, right? I mean, if we're talking about all of these community mechanisms, the one that we're most interested, right, is the development of trust,
right?
Either through social proofing or through social connection, where you can say, this person also knows this person quite well, therefore there's that generation of trust. So I think that as much as these kind of censorship ideas of how we are able to manage our own communities can be looked at in a strange way, they are a very vital point and part of keeping our community the way we want it to be.
Yeah. I mean, speaking as a community leader, rather than an employee of Topia, myself, I think that having rules in community on, or at least guiding principles that allow you to say, like, this is how we're going to show up in relationship together. I think that that's really important, because it allows for, one of the metaphors that I like to use is sitting at the intersection of the safe space and the brave space. So how do we create spaces that are both safe and allow people to be brave and be authentic and be vulnerable? Because you can't have one without the other. And so rules create that safety that's necessary for that safety net to be there. And then from there, people can choose to be brave on top of it and say, I'm going to be more vulnerable because I know that there's this community guideline that says that we're not going to discriminate here. And so I feel safer to be brave and vulnerable being who I am, because I know that this community has my back and is aligned with my values.
So there's another point of community. Sorry, Shauna, to just run through this one. There's another point of community there that I think you gloss over that's rather important, and that's accountability. Because one of the things that a community is technically, if we talk like the sociological design of a community, is to normalize the radical behaviors of the outliers inside of the community. So inside of your own community, to be able to go, hold on, Peter, come back a little bit. Your ideas have either gone too far, or we need to have a little talk about how you are in this community, or if this is the correct fit for how you want to be.
Right. Yeah.
And that accountability is important.
Yeah, setting those expectations up front with members is one piece of that accountability. I think that the other piece of it is that, like, you need to be able to have a clear, your community members need to be able to have clarity on what's expected of them, and if they violate those expectations, what are the repercussions. And one of the things that I'm a really big believer in, I believe that transformative justice in community is one of the most powerful tools that we can use to create more investment from our community members. And transformative justice is this idea that, you know, if I violate the community guidelines because I said something that was inappropriate and offended someone in a way that was not cool, I then, you know, am approached by leadership to have and I have an opportunity to say, oh, I either get to step into growth here and learn from my mistakes, and maybe I get put on timeout in the community for a while until I can prove that, like, I've learned why that behavior wasn't okay. Or if I choose not to engage with that, then I can, you know, then I'm removed from the community, or I choose to leave the community as a result. So that's one of the ways that I really like to go about accountability, because I do really believe that, like, as community members and community leaders, part of our responsibility is to ask people to step into growth alongside us.
I'm so impressed with the theme of this sort of courage and bravery, which I hadn't heard articulated in exactly the way that you've just done. And it's surprising to me a little bit too, Brooke, because as I've looked through some of the Topia marketing pieces, I don't see that Topia really advertises themselves in that way. They don't advertise themselves in this utilitarian, gender fluid environment that Richard alluded to, that he liked and appreciated. And nor do they advertise themselves. Richard and I often think very differently. I have found this space actually very fun and engaging, and I think it spoke. You know, you mentioned, Brooke, that you're an illustrator. I think it spoke to the illustrator in me. It has that sort of like a sketch kind of feel with the lines that are sort of moving, and you can create your own little office. And it had a very creative element to it that I really loved. I'm wondering about, you know, maybe it would be good at this point for you to tell us a little bit about how Topia came to be, some of the forces that are behind it, and a little bit of the history, because it's very interesting that it's sort of in a way almost like in the realm of all of the platforms that are out there, in the realm of the big universe of platforms, Utopia has kind of taken a little bit of a quiet approach, but yet when you get there, there's a lot to unpack. So I wonder if you can share a little bit about the history and the founders, and how it came to be, if you have that information.
Yeah, absolutely. I can share what I know. So the Topia was born kind of out of the pandemic. I think many of us who had been deeply seated in community were really feeling like we needed community more than ever in that moment when all of those lockdowns first went into place, and we were like, oh man, I'm missing my friends. Like especially the burner community as an example, we were like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? And Topia was kind of in its infancy before that happened. There were lots of ideas floating around prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic really kind of lit that fire and sparked it and stoked it into what it is now. The first really big event that we hosted was the virtual burn in 2020. So we were one of the, I believe it was 6 virtual worlds who helped host the virtual Burning Man. And that was a really big moment for us as a platform, because we really got to see it in full swing in its most creative potential with this community that many of us are a part of. I myself am a burner. Many of us on the team are. And we got to experiment and be in this space in community together in a way that we hadn't in a really long time. So that's kind of the how it came to be, and what kind of ended up getting us to where we are. And then again, last year we also hosted the virtual burn as well. But the interesting part is my intersection with Topia was through experience design digitally. So before I was a part of Topia, I actually didn't help host the virtual burn in 2020. I didn't start on the team until 2021. But I was working in digital experience design, throwing this party that we called Immersiverse. And it was a online event that you could log into and see all this really amazing art that was generated by community through Zooms and all sorts. And you were like jumping through portals and rooms and all of these things. And it was really, really fun. And so that's actually when I got introduced to Topia, because Topia did an Immersiverse room with us. And that was before the virtual burn and before the team. So it's kind of this really interesting, like, so much of it was about creativity and this really deep need for creative outlet during that time, and connection and the intersection of those things. How can we be in deep collaborative creation together and also connect intimately and have these really unique experiences, even though we have boundaries around our physical constraints?
So I have a question there. Where
Yeah.
do you think that the pandemic and the way everyone was forced to isolate in the real world has increased and intensified the growth of the desire for community to be the new trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that prior to the pandemic, community was always something that has been a really big part of people's lives.
Hmm.
We just weren't seeing it in digital space as much. Think of the church as an example, right? Like the church is kind of the quintessential community, right? You get
Hmm.
intergenerational people coming there. It's every Sunday. You have your rituals, you have your habits, and so many people find community in those kinds of places. I think that the pandemic really caused us to look at digital platforms and think, how do I retain the community that I care about so much with the constraints that are in front of me? And so I do think that as a result, what we witnessed is like all of these communities turning into digital mediums, in addition to a lot of new communities being built that hadn't been there before. Global communities, right? On Topia, we have a community of people that I help manage and run, and they're from all over the world. And it's like these are people that I never would have met in real life if I hadn't come to Topia. So there's this new opportunity that's in front of us, this new kind of frontier of what's possible with community that wasn't possible prior to our kind of like this forcing mechanism socially for us to turn to digital platforms.
Don't you think, though, that in community, I don't know, Richard, what your thoughts are about this, but in community, you need a common factor. You need some sort of commonality. There has to be a central, much like a DAO, there has to be a central unifying
Also valid.
reason,
Yeah.
yeah, so for people to be there. What do you see as Tobia develops
Mm-hmm.
and as more people come in? And you spoke about this sort of intergenerational aspect that, now we have people of all generations sort of waking up to the fact that the metaverse will be the future. What do you see that people want? What do they want out of the platform? And what
Yeah.
do they want out of their communities?
Yeah. I think one of the common themes that's really important to the people in our community as well as on our team is the creation piece, as I was speaking about earlier. I think that people, create. There's an author that I really love named Andreas Weber who talks about creativity as one of the central life forces for humans. That to be a creator is something that's kind of inherent to all of us in some way, shape, or form. And so I think that one piece of this is the creative piece that's associated with Topia. As a creator on Topia, as an illustrator, you can buy and sell digital assets with other users. You can create whole scenes, whole worlds, whole events on platform. We also are thinking of community builders as creators as well. And so when you gather people around and we call them confluencers, and the confluence is where two rivers come together. And so it's this idea of rather than moving from the influencer to the confluencer, people that are creating moments and gatherings of people in space that that create new opportunities for us understanding ourselves and each other better. So I think that's kind of the central theme that ties our community at Topia together, is the sense of community and creation and how they're interconnected. And we believe at Topia that creators are the future. I think that when we're talking about Web3, when we're talking about the metaverse and all of these big things that so many people still don't understand, what I believe is that, and what our team believes is that, creativity is at the center of that. And our ability to create and to really bring people together. So that's what I would say.
Can I follow on from that, please? Because I'd just like to add something to that, because I think you're absolutely spot on. Especially as we see like the mechanization of industry coming. And I'm going to use a very simple example. Accountants. You know what I mean? Where are people who have fulfilled that bookkeeping and accounting role, for as much, yes, like AI and robotics is going to start taking over manufacturing jobs, we have to start looking at what are the corporate jobs that are going to start being taken over by this. And the ones that are going to get taken over are those ones that are easily repeatable and completely renewable with smart contracts.
Yep.
So what we're going to start seeing, and what actually starts happening, is as those jobs start being consumed by zero cost mechanisms. Because trust me, as soon as I cannot pay $600 an hour for an accountant, I'm not going to pay it. And I think that as we go forward into seeing how the mechanization of industry happens, creativity is a bastion of humanity.
Yep. It's a really unique, like, human thing that has no, it's so rooted in so much chaos that like an AI couldn't produce something the way that we could, I mean, it's creativity is life. It's this explosion of life and color that we as humans can understand because we're a part of the chaos of this universe and of this world. But anything that we program, isn't going to be able to understand that in quite the same way. They need patterns and things like that. So I think you're totally right.
Yeah, it's fun to see as well. I'm also liking the idea that with that comes the financial benefit to it as well. Because what's happening at the moment to me, and again, this is just an overlay of an outsider looking at the States and looking at the whole system of what it goes, okay, all of the financial power has moved to the sectors of people who are counting the money. You know what I mean? So if the things counting money are now computers that follow a set rule that doesn't allow for the corruption and so on of people's greed when they're dealing with the money, what then happens to the creatives? Are we going to see an influx of capital coming into creatives? Are we going to see creatives and universities start being more applicable? Are we going to see decreases in funding into accounting, law, and those kind of things in big institutions and more focus onto creative sides? It's interesting to think of what these community developments and what the value of creativity to a society and to the individual communities that those creatives are connected to. I think it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, you're spot on. This is something that I think about all of the time, is that, like, I believe that we are in a creative renaissance right now. And that we are going to, like, our value of creators in our societies is going to change really drastically. And we at Topia, we've talked a lot about this. And so that's why we have programs that allow creators to actually make commissions and make income from doing what they do best, which is to create. And for so long, I think we've asked creators to be a part of an industrialized, economy that just like it's not their skill set. It's not what they're good at. And I don't think it's what we need. Like, we need creators. We need people who are thinking outside of the box. We need people who are being exploratory and thinking about the edges of possibility more than ever before with all of these insane crises that we currently face. So I think not only is there a need for it, but I also think it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
We will continue to move into this creative renaissance and watch our value of things that aren't creative endeavors shift.
Now, have you actually been able to feel that inside of the communities?
That's just what I was going to get ready to say. So let me just share my own experience of walking through Topia.io, which was sort of like, I don't know how many of you know that I grew up in New England, and there are these tremendous brick factories from what used to be a very centric trade industry. And
Mm-hmm.
they've converted a lot of these brick industrial production facilities into art spaces. And so as you're in Topia.io and you're walking about on the platform with your Topi, you sort of, you want to stop into every little person's office, for lack of a better word, because they've got something going on in there that you never even expected to see. It's sort of like that feeling in the real world when you're in one of these converted art warehouse spaces,
Mm-hmm.
that you don't know, you're in a weaver's shop one minute and then you're in a potter's shop the next minute, and then the guy down the street is doing kung fu at 3 o'clock. It's an amazing array of the range of creativity that exists. But I do think that there is there's a difference between, we're talking about a couple of themes. We have the theme of community and the theme of creativity, but that differs from the theme of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you both about your thoughts on how do we bring in that third leg of the stool: community, creativity, and now that third piece of marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, um, I think that marketing is a piece of it, kind of inherently in the system that we live under. I think it's kind of a tough answer because marketing is so deeply tied to um, this kind of definition that we all have of what marketing is, right? And I think that when we pair it with what we're talking about around value shifts in creativity and focus shifts around community, I think that we're going to watch marketing change a lot. And it's going to look more and more like community building, kind of sitting at the intersection of culture, um, business development, and what we now call marketing, right? And so growth and culture and all of those pieces, it's about brand authenticity, right? It's about all of those little pieces, and that's really what community is at the end of the day. It's aligning your values with your actions as an organization, and marketing is inherently a piece of that, I think.
I have thoughts. I agree with you completely, Brooke. I think the change is coming. Um, and I think that part of it is also going to be perception of marketing. And I'm going to quote one of my favorite fun people to quote on this. It's Gary Vee, who says I quote him, his exact quote is, "Marketers ruin everything eventually." Because I mean, I remember initially being on Instagram and Facebook and so on before they realized that it was an advertising platform. You know what I mean? So we can kind of say, okay, marketers can go into a social side of something and go, okay, their eyeballs, I need to sell something so that I am going to go and use those eyeballs. And that draw of marketers to areas where there are eyeballs because of the benefit of profit from those eyeballs.
Right. Yeah. You're talking about the attention economy.
Exactly. And marketing and marketers are rank and horrible at putting big, nasty signs that none of us want to see right where we're all looking. Okay.
Yeah.
And we all don't like it. I mean, how many of us watch adverts on TV? None.
Yeah.
How many of us scroll straight over adverts on these places? None of us like to be advertised at. And that's one of the key parts of marketing. So I think what kind of fascinates me about this area that we're going into is that marketers are going to have to learn how to build a community,
Mm-hmm.
not sell a product.
Right.
Because one
Well,
develops trust, and the other is directed at profit.
Yeah,
Yes, but on the other hand, how many communities can one person belong to? I mean, thank God, LinkedIn, I think, has a limit of 100 different groups that one can be participate in. And you could easily, in the course of 2 or 3 days, max that out.
Mm-hmm.
How many communities are we going to get before, the essence of the idea becomes so uh, watered down that you don't even know what you're even in that group for anymore? You know what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's this author that I absolutely love named Adrienne Marie Brown, and a lot of their work actually guides what I do. And they write this book called Emergent Strategy, which is all about movement building. So another piece of my life that I'm letting you in on is I'm really into advocacy work. I think
Mm-hmm.
movement building is really important, and believe myself to be an advocate through and through. And so I think that when we think about community building in organizations, what where we're kind of shifting to is moving from selling a product to building a movement. And I think once we begin to like actually meaningfully make that shift, because first of all, people don't want you to sell them on advertisement. Nobody cares about advertisements anymore. Like we don't want it. Nobody wants to do it. Like people are sick of Facebook. Like we don't want to do it anymore. Generally speaking, I know millennials and Gen Zers are like, no, absolutely not. And those are the people who are going to be taking over the market, right? And so we have to really think about like what does the audience actually want and need, and the number one most important thing to Gen Z is movements and social justice and doing something that is purposeful and feels aligned with their values. And so I think as companies and as purpose driven organizations in particular, we have a huge opportunity here to begin to realign our how we talk about who we are, less as I'm selling you a product and more of a I'm calling you into this movement alongside me of creativity and community. And so I think that shift is beginning to happen. We're seeing a lot of particularly startup organizations begin thinking about things in these ways. And I think it's just going to become more and more relevant. But to your point, Shauna, about, you can only be a part of so many communities, I think you're totally right. I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can understand our relationship to identity and our values, and witness the way that other organizations or other people may or may not also hold those values. And just because I am maybe like a silent or like a spectator community member in a community doesn't mean that I'm not invested in the mission, because it's aligned with my values as an individual. So I don't think that we should be expecting every single person who's a part of our community to be a, ambassador, number one contributor. Like that's not realistic. There's this, I think it's called the Dunner number, of 150 close friends. You can have 150 close friends. And any more than that, and it starts to become acquaintances. And so we really need to think about that when we're thinking about engagement in community. Like you can't expect everyone to be a full-time collaborator in your community, because it's actually not possible to retain that many intimate relationships.
The thing is this, though, even if we look at LinkedIn, and I'm very grateful for everything LinkedIn has done for us, and personally, it's an amazing tool. But it in itself is its own community, and I've been shocked and surprised to see that come Friday night at 5 o'clock Pacific time, the place is like crickets.
Yeah.
And so when it's on fire and it's hot and your friends are linking and they're, tagging you, and the conversation's going, there's no better place for business deals and connections and information, in my view. But that Friday at 5 o'clock, when it's crickets, the truth is that the magic happens for us 24 hours a day. It happens during my day life at work, and it happens in my evening life when I'm drawing and I'm thinking about art and what it can mean. And it happens when I go to take, my son for a walk, or whatever the case is. Um, so I'm looking for community and connection, marketing and collaboration that seamlessly crosses those lines, that it doesn't feel like, okay, I've moved from who I am in the LinkedIn space to who I am in real life. I'd like that to be much more of a seamless
Yeah.
operation.
Yeah. We're whole people. We want to be
Whole
whole.
people, yes, yes.
So I have a question for both of you about this. So for me, as we move away from being advertised at, the idea of verbal referral as a marketing ecosystem, not as a more as a marketing structure, where we're going to more localized conversations and localized communities, sharing internally referrals and answering questions to people who trust us. Do you see that kind of develop into marketing inside of communities?
That's an interesting question. I think it depends on how, like, it's tough to say because the current state of marketing and the future state of marketing are different, right?
Of course,
And
this is all a prediction game and a
yeah.
what if game, right?
And so, I think that in some sense, yes, that is marketing. Those are your brand ambassadors, right? But I also think that there's potentially maybe marketing isn't the best word for it. um, I've always felt myself much more pulled to the idea of movement building over marketing, or just even community building over marketing. And it is more grassroots. It's more of a grassroots effort to do that kind of work, and it is slower. But my experience has been that that is what creates that real deep investment, right? In what you're doing. And so, yeah, I don't know that really gave you an answer though.
Let me. Let me
Well,
frame the
wait a
question a
minute. Do I
little bit
get a chance? Do
differently.
I get a chance?
Yeah. Sorry.
So I think, isn't that the beauty of the DAO, though? Isn't
Mm.
that the beauty of the DAO, where the collaborative and the consensus is driving what the DAO looks like, how the DAO acts, what the DAO does for money, what the DAO stands for? And go ahead with your question, but I want to come back because I do have a question for Brooke.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Richard.
So for me, the thought was of we still have to move product. I mean
Right.
that we still have to have an economy that moves financial assets and products around internally somehow.
Right.
So that still means that no matter what, products and so on are going to have to find ways to have their stories brought into communities.
Mm-hmm.
So advertising has been a very big way of doing that as we've been using, but none of us like it.
Yeah.
But as people who are involved in marketing, we still have to think that there are products being developed that need to be developed, that are advancing the system, that are advancing the cause, that are only being able to be done with the promise of profit. So
Right.
we still have this need inside society to pass those things around.
Yeah.
So as we're going forward and we're wanting to think of how do we decrease ways of being advertised at, because we all hate it,
Mm.
how do we increase ways that we talk about those products? Does that make the question a little bit better?
Yeah. I don't know that I have a good answer.
We used to call, back in the day, we used to call it the 360 degrees, right? And it kind of speaks to what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, this sort of seamlessness between the different people and entities that we are in business and in our real lives. Because the truth of the matter is, no matter how much time we end up spending on Topia.io, because it's so much fun, or in the metaverse, or on games, or whatever the case may be, we still do need, as human beings, that balance between life and work.
Yeah.
And we want, I think, my thinking is that we want that authenticity. I want to know that the Richard that I'm talking to tonight on Metaverse Watchdogs during our Metaverse podcast is the same Richard who today posted a fantastic photo of him with a huge, fantastic snake around his neck. It's the same guy. It's the same fantastic guy. So that authenticity of that, who you are, what you do, what your social life looks like, what you're concerned about, what you want to do for a living, the people you hang out with, that it's all sort of interconnected. Can we get there? Is
You know,
Topia going to help us get there?
I think that, and that's the thing is, like, part of what I feel so fortunate, because I feel like I'm there already. Like I'm already living a fully authentic life in my work, on these kinds of conversations. And I think part of it is because we're creating a new kind of culture at Topia, where we're focused around things that, that are really important to our progression as humanity, and to meaningful, intimate relationships and purpose-driven community building. And so I feel like I'm living a super authentic life right now, and I can't say that I've always felt that way. Like Topia has been such a huge blessing to me. Our team is amazing, and I feel like I'm working with some of my closest friends, and that's such a joyful place to be in. And my hope is that through these kinds of technologies that allow us to really step into authenticity with one another, we'll be able to see more and more and more of that. But it requires a really big cultural change, and that's not going to happen overnight. That takes a lot of time. And so, there's I think that we're in this little catch-22 moment right now, where the culture isn't there yet. It's happening, but broadly speaking, generally speaking, these types of experiences around authenticity across many different mediums and many different versions of our life, and how we show up in different spaces isn't there yet. But I do believe that we will get there. And I believe that technologies like Topia help make that possible.
I'd like
So
to go
I'm
back.
wondering. Go ahead.
Sorry,
You
Shauna,
first.
go for it.
You first.
Okay.
Mine can wait. Go you first.
Hey, quick guys. I'd like to put a pin in something you brought up before, because in Web 2.0 we saw this massive boom of influencer and the influencers and so on. And you brought up this lovely word. What was it? It was
Confluence.
confluences.
Mm-hmm.
Of basically, I kind of picture that of influencers who are prepared to collaborate.
Yeah. So it's we like to define it as people who bring people together. Um, and that can look like a community leader. It can look like a DJ. It can look like, all sorts of different, it can take all sorts of different forms. But people who create experiences for others and bring people together. I would consider myself a confluencer as a community builder and event producer. I would consider you guys confluencers as people, as community builders, building this Metaverse Watchdogs community and having these kinds of conversations. Confluencers are people who bring people together.
And confluencers can thrive actually on this platform. It's one of the things that makes Topia unique, because you've got this ability to network and to engage people with a common core theme. And then on the backside, you're contributing to a larger community. So there's an exchange there that happens. It's very unique, I think.
Yeah, we also work really hard to make sure we have a whole confluencer program on Topia as well, where you can actually earn for bringing people together on Topia, which is quite cool.
Any network to earn is going to make anyone with a network very happy.
That's for sure. But I want to ask you just for a moment, Brooke, about something a little bit off topic, just for a second. It's
Yeah.
related, but it's a little off topic. I happen to know that you are a fan of yoga.
I am.
And yes, she does do her homework occasionally.
I love
And
that.
I'm curious to know, how meditation, and Richard often turns to nature. He's a fantastic naturalist, and he has had fantastic travels. You really have to talk to him offline about that. But uh, for those that have that period of introspection, that period of meditation, that period of off the internet, disconnectedness, centered with the source. How has that influenced your personal life, and how do you see that contributing to what you might do next?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful question, and thank you so much for asking it. Um, the stillness piece of it is really important. I think for a long, and I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable right now. For a long time in my life, I felt like I was chasing. I was like climbing this crazy ladder, and I was like, I want to be seen, I want to be respected, I want to be heard. I feel like many of us feel that way. And it wasn't until through 5 years ago now that I really took the time to be still and start to understand myself. And some of that was through the practice of yoga, through meditation. A lot of it was through nature and reading and hiking, also Burning Man, and all of these amazing experiences that push us to our edges, that push us to our limits, have all taught me a lot about myself. And I think that all of that integrating work that I've done through the education, the meditation, the yoga, and these peak experiences that I've had has really taught me a lot about my core beliefs and who I really believe that I am, which allows me to show up in deep authenticity with the people around me and learn way more as a result of that. So I think that I brought up not Adrian Marie Brown, I'm sorry, Andreas Weber earlier. In his book, Matter and Desire, one of the things that he says is that it is only through witnessing another's aliveness that we are then reminded of our own.
It's a good quote.
And that is probably one of the core philosophies that I follow now when it comes to the work that I do. If I'm not increasing aliveness within myself and within others around me, I'm not doing work that is contributing to the aliveness of the whole. And I think that being attuned to aliveness, being in relationship with one another, is how we're going to get to the next phase of all of life thriving, which is really at the end of the day what I want. I want all of life to thrive. And so I believe that building healthy relationships and enabling a deepening of aliveness is what gets us there. And I would not have come to that conclusion if it weren't for diving really deeply into these experiences around yoga, meditation, reading, and then things like Burning Man and festivals. I wouldn't have gotten there without it.
I have to applaud your bravery.
Thank you.
Because A, being vulnerable like that is difficult, but B, the journey that you've gone on and intentionally pushing your own boundaries is a privilege that most people don't realize that they have. And by going that deeply into it and looking in rather than out for fulfillment, you are incredibly brave.
Thank you. I couldn't have done it without this amazing community of people that I have surrounding me in the Bay Area. I'm so fortunate here to have people who are thinking outside of the box, who are deeply integrated in all of these cultural edges around awakening and enlightenment and all of these pieces that we so often hear touted all over the place. And so I couldn't have done it without them. And that doesn't mean that my life isn't hard. Like life is still really hard. I'm still hurt. I still have grief, like all of these things. And I think I always will. But I can come at those from a place of center. My therapist says to me, acknowledge yourself for staying centered in the storm, and acknowledge yourself for what is it? The second part for making it farther than you ever thought you could. And I think that acknowledgement of center is the really important piece that allows us to kind of keep moving forward with clear direction and intention and alignment in our purpose and who we are.
Beautifully said.
Those are some gems right there.
I think the other thing that you've picked on there is what it allows you to is it allows you the choice to move forward in a way that you know will benefit you because you've taken the time to look in.
Yep.
So she's really, I mean, in a way, Brooke, you're really a pioneer to a degree. I mean, it's not everybody who goes to Burning Man. There's some people out there that think Burning Man is an unhinged circus of freaks. So that takes a
Sounds
little bit of
perfect.
bravery and courage. I know Rich is all in. Like, Rich is like, give me the ticket. Where do I buy the ticket?
I'm like, let's go. It's still on my to-do list. Burning Man is very much on my to-do list.
The secret is all of life is a little bit unhinged.
Yes, exactly. And then she finds herself in this space that's really quite undefined and very amorphous and very sort of developmental. And it's very interesting. When you meet someone, Brooke, that has never even heard the words NFT or doesn't know what a virtual platform might look like or has no clue what it is to be a futurist or a, let me give you another one. How about cybernetics, or you
Yeah,
know,
I
what's
can't
the
tell you
one?
the kinds of like Thanksgiving dinner table conversations I'm having with my family around like
I mean, how do
crypto
you
and
start? How do
NFT.
you start at square zero with someone that has no awareness about that whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, I do not tout myself to be an expert in NFTs or crypto or any of that. I can really only speak to this idea of the metaverse. And what I try to kind of say to people is that it's kind of, like I just kind of I try to extract the truest value, which is it's a way to build relationships with people in digital space that feels really authentic and not like you're screaming into the void on social media. And
I,
just try to keep it simple.
I like that reference of screaming into the void. That's so much of what social media feels like because you're stuck in your dark little room,
And
Yeah.
not even
tapping the piece
screaming.
of glass,
Yeah,
thinking
sometimes
that
sometimes whispering into the void, and still there's no, you know, there's a saying we say. Used to say in the church that the void, that when you speak into the void comes back. That nothing spoken into the void is unreturned. There's
Mhm.
always
Mm.
a return for what one speaks into the great unknown. And but in social media, it certainly does often feel like that, doesn't it? That you speak no matter how softly or loudly. And is anybody is anybody out there?
Yeah.
Is
You know what? I
anybody
think
there?
that's one of the things that people get this fascination with likes about.
Oh,
Is
it's
because
really
it's
dopamine.
it
It's a dopamine hit.
complete that here I want to throw this out to the void and see how it is.
Yep.
I remember, and I can actually remember how bad a dopamine hit it was, not from the dopamine that I was getting from building the community on Instagram, but the feeling of loss when they changed the algorithm and I watched my reach go down to 10% of what it was in 2 days.
Right.
Mm.
That I never have forgiven Instagram for that
Well,
feeling
because
that they
all of a
caused
sudden
in me.
it becomes associated with your worth, your worthiness,
Hmm.
Hey,
right?
listen, I'm still harboring anger against LinkedIn. I love you, LinkedIn. Please don't ban me. About not being able to show my own PFP. I want to be able to show my avatar icon, and I don't want it to be taken down, and I want to be able to have that self expression. And gosh darn it, doesn't the First Amendment protect that? I should be able to. But it's terms of service. And
Hmm.
so certainly there must be a reason. I don't understand that reason. But when you see bored apes come up on people's profiles and yet you can't post your own little crazy avatar, it goes a lot towards the whole idea of what is freedom of expression, what is freedom of creativity, what is freedom of being able to operate on these platforms in these spaces in again an authentic and transparent and consistent way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If you guys haven't looked at the work of the Center for Humane Technology, it would be an interesting thing to look into. They helped produce a film recently that's quite good that you should absolutely watch. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts with Tristan Harris and some of the other members there that have been really good and talked a lot about this idea of the attention economy and how is social media actually impacting our psychology.
Yeah, Tristan Harris has done a lot of very good work in that. Both of his books are very well. Is it both?
Brilliant.
But yeah, both are very, very good.
Yes. So that's a really, really interesting thing. And then the Center for Humane Technology is the organization that he's associated with. So totally get involved. I think that, you know, I don't think that it's impossible to build technology that is aligned with these values that I think we've discussed here today. I think that we just really need to think differently about our business models. Um, and that's going to take a little bit of a culture shift and a little bit of pulling, pulling people along with us, even though they may not necessarily want to.
Luckily, we have activists such as yourself
Yeah.
pushing in the right direction to make sure we get there. So thank you for your energy that you're putting into what you believe in, because not only have you gone and looked in to define your beliefs, you've actually got the conviction to run with them and create the communities that can actually do something with those beliefs.
I agree. I agree. So before we close, Brooke, give us your top 5 tips for networkers and connectors and people who are trying to build community. Tell us the top 5 things that you see that we need to be doing to succeed, whether it's on Topia or whether it's in LinkedIn or whether it's just in life. What does a good networker and community builder need?
I think number one, focus on experience, not on content. Number two, lead by example. Be authentic in who you are with your community, and they will be authentic with you. Number three, always be curious. Always be curious. Lead with curiosity in every instance. Never make assumptions because you don't always have the full story.
Love that.
Number 4. I'm running out. Okay, let's see. Number 4, make sure to take time for yourself. It's really, really easy to burn out when you're building community and put all of yourself into others. But if you empty your well, you're not going to be any good to anyone else. So make sure to fill up your own cup too. And number 5, I think it's kind of is in line with curiosity, but compassion is always a word that is really important to the work that I do. Trying to lead with compassion for those around you. Seek understanding versus truth. Seek greater understanding versus truth.
Can I add a number 6?
Yes.
It's going to take longer
than you think.
Yes.
And I'll add a number 7. Do your research. Do a little bit of legwork. Do your research. Brooke, we are so impressed. Richard and I are blown away. We are so impressed. If the owners of Topia.io are listening tonight, this soul needs a raise. She did that off the top of her head. She spoke beautifully tonight, intelligently, bright, inspiring, and presented.
I hope there's a lot of young ladies that are listening tonight that feel the inspiration that we feel from this. Well done, Brooke. Well done.
Thank you. You guys are making me feel so nice.
But even presented some about bravery and courage in the space. Brooke, we're absolutely so impressed, and we would just want to thank you for a beautiful hour that we've spent here together. It went by so quickly, I can't even believe it. Richard, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, just thank you, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have another chat further down the line. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Brooke.
Thank you
as well. Brooke, we wish you the best. Just stay behind, and Richard will close us out. Everyone join us next week, and we'll have more on the Metaverse Watchdog Metaverse broadcast.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.